Hello, I'm here to give you an introduction to developments 1.3 and 1.4, and also to talk a little bit about the exploration of the rest of the world by Europeans. I didn't mention that in the first couple videos with the last assignment, so I'm sorry about that, but I will talk about that here at the beginning. What I want to talk about just as a big picture to give you this preview to developments 1.3 and 1.4 is the way in which a lot of different factors come together to shape this particular time here in the 15 and 1600s. Different historians have different points of view about what are the most important types of factors in shaping history, and those are really interesting debates and important. And here, anyway, you can see a few of the different types of factors coming together to change other aspects of society. Okay, so when we're looking at development 1.1 and 1.2 in the introduction of the class, we saw some really important trends going on in Europe. And I'll highlight a couple of those to show you how they then influence the rest of the developments in this time. First of all, we have a political movement or a political set of factors here where a lot of kings or regional princes or regional rulers, emperors, were trying to centralize their authority. They were trying to get local rulers, local towns and cities, local nobles to follow the great duke or prince or king or emperor. Okay, so you see this in the Holy Roman Empire, where the Holy Roman emperors want more authority in what we now call Germany, to want more authority in the German states. We see this in England, as the monarchs there are trying to increase their authority over the kingdom. We see this in France, where there's rivalries between the nobles and the king over who's going to have authority in areas that nobles are used to having. Okay, so one of the key rivalries here in some different countries is the rivalry between the kings who want to extend their power over their kingdoms, and the nobles who want to retain their power over their local areas. Okay, and so that's something really important that's going on. Also, we see in that same vein, one of the reasons that kings are trying to increase their power is that they themselves want to control the resources of their kingdom. They want to control the military aspects of their kingdom in order to wage war against other kings. Okay, so it's not just for fun that they want more power. It's also that there's this burgeoning rivalry between France and the Holy Roman Empire and Spain. The Holy Roman Empire and Spain are controlled by the branches of the same family, the Habsburg family, after in the early 1500s and afterwards. Okay, so there's efforts there to get as much control over the kingdom as possible, to have taxing power to pay for armies for these kings, to exercise their sovereignty over their kingdoms, to take pieces of other kingdoms away. Not only do that, you have the rivalry between the Habsburg Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, based in what we now call Turkey, which is very powerful. Okay, so these kind of rivalries are there, and war is getting more expensive as kings are competing with each other, as they are trying to get bigger armies. They're also then trying to outfit these armies with the latest weapons, whether those are pikes and then firearms and the handheld kind of musket firearms by the soldiers, artillery or early cannons. This is all expensive stuff, and kings are trying to get more and more power, to get more money from their subjects in order to pay for these weapons. Okay, so that's all the political aspect of what's going on here. Okay, that's happening before there's any religious controversies. And it's also all happening right around the same time that you have the exploration of the rest of the world by European explorers, sailors, merchants, right? And so as kings are trying to increase their power, there's also this effort by European merchants and also the rulers of European countries to get more access, more direct access to China and India. Okay, and one of the things that's important to understand is in the world around 1500, even as in the 1600 and up till probably the 1700s, the most powerful and wealthy country in the world is China. Okay, China is wealthy, it's powerful, it's got lots and lots of goods, spices and silk and all sorts of things that Europeans want, wealthy Europeans want. All right, and so not surprisingly, European merchants and European rulers want access to Chinese goods. They want to bring them home and sell them, right? And so how do they get that? Well, they don't want to have to go through the Ottoman Empire, which is the empire based in Turkey, and that's why they're looking for a direct route there. Okay, the Portuguese succeed by the late 1400s in going around, all the way around the southern tip of Africa and getting to India. Okay, India is the other major center of goods that Europeans want. And India is not under one single empire, but it's a pretty powerful, wealthy region. Okay, so as we're starting the course, it's not the Europeans that are the most powerful; it's the Chinese, and India is also a very wealthy region with some considerable states there, and so that is a big part of the reason why there's this exploration to get to China, India, Japan, even as well. Okay, and it's the Portuguese who go east, but the Spanish go west. Christopher Columbus convinces the Spanish monarchy under Ferdinand and Isabella to fund his exploration west. He thinks he's going to get all the way to China and India, to Asia, but he doesn't. Unbeknownst to him, there's two huge continents in between going west. That's North and South America. He always thinks he's reached Asia, but he's wrong about that. But Europeans realize that there is indeed another set of territories there, oftentimes wealthy and with a lot of resources that they also would like to get a hold of. Okay. Incidentally, just so we know, no, Columbus did not prove the world was round. Educated Europeans knew that the world was round by 1492. Okay, but he did show accidentally that there were two huge continents there. Helped to show anyway, North and South America, and so he is very important in that way. And the Spanish lay claim to really almost everything in North and South America and the Caribbean. The Portuguese get Brazil, and then other European countries over time will stake their colonies there, defying the Spanish claim, right? And so this becomes really important for European countries over time, and they want to exploit these areas. They want to colonize them. They want to trade the products that are there. They want to rule the Native Americans, okay? And this is important. It becomes most important for Spain, first of all, because they're really there first in large numbers. And the amounts of silver they extract from the New World is really helpful for fueling the war machine of Spain. Okay, it helps to make Spain, which was already powerful under Ferdinand and Isabella, it helps to make them even more powerful. Okay, it pays for soldiers and ships and all sorts of things. In the long run, though, it also makes things more expensive as other countries try to compete. So it helps to fuel war competition, and in the long run too, it causes inflation. Okay, because with so much silver coming back and considerable amounts of gold too, silver is the big export. So much it comes back, it helps to make all that silver ultimately less valuable in individual pieces, right? Because there's so much of it. Interestingly, also, most of the silver that's taken out of the New World ends up in China because that's where the goods are that so many Europeans, wealthy Europeans, want. Okay, so that's all. This is a political and economic tie here. There's also intellectual and religious movements going on too, and you see the Renaissance first of all. Okay, the Renaissance is an idea of going back to the sources of the ancient world. Renaissance humanists say, we've really kind of lost our way. We need to recover the wisdom of the ancient world in architecture, in painting, in Latin and Greek original sources, and whether that's the letters of Cicero or the some ancient philosophies, but also that means that there's an interest in what about reading the Bible in its original languages? What about reading the Bible in Hebrew and Greek, as opposed to the church's official Latin Bible, which was a translation of those original manuscripts? What about reading the ancient church fathers, Augustine and John Chrysostom and others in their original language, and really understanding what wisdom they have for the 14 and 1500s? What about reading ancient science and trying to recover what the ancients knew about science? And this is really an important movement. It produces an intellectual desire to understand the past. And it really helps to fuel, actually, the Protestant and Catholic Reformations, where Protestants like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Hildred Zwingli, and others want to not only recover ancient wisdom, they specifically want to reform the church according to what they believe the Bible says. And they argue that the Catholic Church, the papacy, has gotten so far and it needs to be reformed. When those suggestions are rejected, or that when the changes they make in their local churches are rejected, you now have different Protestant branches. But there are also Catholics who want to stay in the Catholic Church and reform some of the problems as they see. And so there are Catholic reforms too. The Jesuits, who are such important missionaries carrying Catholicism around the world, into the New World, into China, into India, they are part of that Catholic Reformation. Okay, and so now you have a split in the European Church, okay, where you have Catholics and Lutherans and Reformed people, Calvinists sometimes called, right, and Baptists, Mennonites, right, all sorts of different groups. And that leads to a lot of stress on European kingdoms, right? Because European kingdoms, ideally, for a powerful king, will have one religion that all people subscribe to. Everybody used to be Catholic, with a few exceptions, and now you have a lot of conflicts within European kings, within kingdoms, and also between kingdoms. And how are kings going to solve this? This becomes difficult. So this plays a part in the French civil wars, the wars of religion, the civil war in the Holy Roman Empire. It plays a part in rivalries between countries like Spain and England. Now, these are called the wars of religion. Sometimes they're not just religious, as if people only are fighting about religious issues, but they certainly influence the civil and international wars of this period. Okay, and also the intellectual movement of the Renaissance and the crisis of this period seems to influence the thoughts about science. Okay, and you'll see in the development 1.4 about the scientific revolution that the scientific revolution is a product of some of these questions about going back to ancient science, about trying to account for all this new knowledge about the new world that has been discovered, all these plant and animal species that are in the Americas that nobody had any idea about. Okay, And so you'll see there that the scientific method, different approaches to science, become really important in trying to make sense of this world where some of the old knowledge doesn't seem to have held up as well. Okay. And the primary sources that go with each development are all related to this here. So we've got the competing advice of Machiavelli and Bellarmine in sources for the Forging Modern World that go with development 1.3. They have different ideas. Machiavelli is very much someone who cares about maintaining power. Bellarmine wants rulers to take a more Christian approach. Okay, and more approach that follows the scriptures and the Christian tradition more carefully. In development 1.4, you have the letter of Galileo, okay, to Benedetto Castelli. There's some background in development 1.4 that should help you understand that. But Galileo is trying to argue that his way of looking at the world is better than the Aristotelian scientists. Okay, so notice that the scientific revolution is not science versus religion only, or maybe even mostly. I would say not mostly. You might disagree on that. We can have different interpretations and try to argue it out, which is good. But it's two different paradigms. I try to explain the traditional paradigm in development 1.4, the Aristotelian view of a hierarchy throughout the universe, okay, and the modern scientific view that argues that we ought to use induction and observation and experimentation to figure it out, okay, and so hopefully you can see the contrast there between those, okay. But notice that Galileo's primary opponents really, at least at first, were other professors of science. Okay, and you can take a look at that as you read.